The wind howled outside Polar Station Omega, a research facility that stood like a fragile metal flower against the endless white landscape of planet Glacius. Dr. Jae-sung Park rubbed his tired eyes, staring at the holographic display that flickered with countless failed experiment logs. Another day, another dead end in his quest to create autonomous cold-resistant robotic units. The station's massive windows revealed nothing but an endless expanse of snow and ice. Glacius was not for the faint of heart. Temperatures regularly dropped to -80 degrees Celsius, and the planet's unique atmospheric conditions made traditional technology practically useless. Most research teams had given up, but not Jae-sung. He knew there was something special about this world. His current project seemed impossible. The military wanted a robotic unit that could survive and operate in extreme cold, capable of maintaining functionality where no human or machine had survived before. Previous attempts had failed spectacularly. Robotic joints would freeze and crack. Electronic systems would shut down. Battery cells would become useless blocks of metal and chemical waste. But Jae-sung was different. He saw problems as challenges, not barriers. On this particular day, he was experimenting with a new compound he had developed. It was a unique mixture of nanopolymers, adaptive ceramic structures, and a revolutionary cooling agent that could theoretically absorb and redistribute thermal energy. The compound had been created after months of research, inspired by the microscopic organisms that survived in the deepest, coldest parts of Glacius. One more test, he muttered to himself, adjusting the laboratory's temperature to match the planet's harshest conditions. The laboratory was a marvel of engineering. Reinforced glass walls separated different testing zones. Advanced sensors monitored every microscopic change. Robotic arms stood ready to manipulate experimental subjects. In the center of the room, a small platform held the latest prototype. Jae-sung's fingers danced across the holographic controls. He initiated the test sequence, watching carefully as the temperature dropped. Most machines would have already failed, but his prototype remained stable. Then something unexpected happened. The nanopolymer compound began to interact with the snow and ice around the prototype. Instead of simply sitting there, the snow started to move. At first, it was just a slight tremor. Then, more distinctly, the snow began to shift and reshape itself. Jae-sung leaned closer, his heart racing. The snow was not just moving. It was forming a structure. Slowly, almost deliberately, the snow was creating a shape. It looked like a basic humanoid form, but with an otherworldly quality that defied standard understanding. "What in the world?" he whispered. The snow being, for lack of a better term, took a step, then another. Its movements were jerky at first, but quickly became more fluid. It seemed to be learning, adapting to its own existence with remarkable speed. Nearby sensors went crazy. They detected something unprecedented. The snow being was not just moving. It was thinking. Somehow, the combination of Jae-sung's nanopolymer compound and the unique environmental conditions of Glacius had created something entirely new. A notification pinged on his computer. The rest of the research team needed to see this immediately. Jae-sung's hands shook slightly as he sent the alert. He had just crossed a line that no scientist had crossed before. The snow being continued to move, each step more precise than the last. It was alive. It was learning. And nobody knew exactly what it was capable of doing. Polar Station Omega would never be the same again. The Global Technological Expo was the most important scientific event of the year. Researchers, military leaders, and government officials from across the human colonies gathered in the massive conference center. Excitement buzzed through the air like electricity, with everyone waiting to see the next big breakthrough that would change human technology. Senior researcher Hyun-ki Kim stood backstage, checking the final preparations. His hands were steady, but his heart raced. The snow beings represented something entirely new, a technology that could reshape human understanding of artificial intelligence and environmental adaptation. 3 snow beings waited in a specially designed containment area. They looked like humanoid shapes made of compact, shimmering snow and ice, with a subtle metallic sheen from the nanopolymer compound. To the untrained eye, they might seem like simple sculptures, but those who knew understood they were something much more. The expo's main hall could hold 10,000 people. Every seat was filled. Holographic screens surrounded the central stage, ready to broadcast the demonstration to millions across human-controlled space. Military representatives from dozens of planetary governments sat in the front rows, their eyes sharp and calculating. Hyun-ki stepped onto the stage. The crowd fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "today we present a technology that will change everything we know about adaptive systems and environmental interaction." The containment area's protective field shimmered and then disappeared. The three snow beings stood motionless for a moment. Then they moved. Their first demonstration was simple but shocking. The beings began to reshape themselves. One moment they looked like humanoid figures. The next they transformed into complex geometric shapes. They could flatten themselves into near-invisible sheets or build themselves into towering structures. Each movement was precise, calculated, and completely fluid. The audience gasped. A large screen behind Hyun-ki showed close-up thermal imaging. The snow beings were absorbing and redistributing heat in ways no previous technology could manage. They could exist in extreme cold without losing structural integrity. More importantly, they could adapt to changing environmental conditions almost instantly. The military representatives leaned forward, their interest clearly piqued. The second demonstration was even more impressive. Hyun-ki activated a series of obstacles: extreme temperature changes, physical barriers, and complex terrain. The snow beings navigated everything perfectly. They could flatten themselves to slip through tiny gaps, reshape to climb vertical surfaces, and maintain complete functionality in conditions that would destroy traditional robots. One of the snow beings approached a complex mechanical lock. Instead of using a traditional approach, it began to reshape its own form. Crystalline structures formed and reformed, probing the lock's mechanism. Within seconds, it had analyzed and opened the lock, something that would have taken a human expert minutes of careful work. The final demonstration pushed the boundaries of what anyone thought possible. The snow beings began to communicate with each other, not through traditional radio or digital signals, but through intricate patterns of ice crystal formation. They shared information, made collective decisions, and seemed to develop a form of group intelligence right before everyone's eyes. Military strategists from Earth, Mars, and the outer colony worlds took extensive notes. This was more than just a technological marvel. This was a potential revolution in warfare, exploration, and survival technology. Hyun-ki knew they were witnessing something historic. The snow beings were not just a new technology. They were a new form of intelligence, created by human hands, but potentially beyond human complete understanding. As the demonstration concluded, the applause was deafening. But beneath the excitement, a more profound question hung in the air. What exactly had they created? The world would never be the same again. The ethics committee meeting room was silent. 12 people sat around a circular table, their faces a mixture of concern, excitement, and deep uncertainty. Lead ethicist Sung-Min Lee looked at the holographic display, showing the snow beings' latest behavioral tests. "We are facing a fundamental challenge to our understanding of consciousness," Sung-Min began, his voice calm but serious. "These beings demonstrate characteristics that blur the line between tool and sentient life." The latest research had revealed something profound. The snow beings were not just responding to programmed commands. They were learning. They were adapting. They were making choices that went beyond their initial programming. In one recent test, a snow being was presented with a complex puzzle. Instead of following a predetermined solution path, it began to create its own approach. When researchers introduced an obstacle, the snow being didn't just stop. It analyzed the problem, reshaped itself, and found an entirely new solution that no one had anticipated. Dr. Yoo-Jin Kim, the lead cognitive researcher, presented her findings. We've observed what appears to be problem-solving skills that go beyond simple algorithmic responses, she explained. The snow beings show signs of what we might call creativity. They're not just processing information. They're interpreting it. The ethical implications were enormous. If the snow beings were truly developing consciousness, did they have rights? Could they be considered a form of life? Were the researchers creating intelligent beings or developing an advanced tool? Historical precedents offered no clear guidance. Previous attempts to create artificial intelligence had always fallen short of true consciousness. The snow beings were different. They seemed to be developing something that looked remarkably like self-awareness. One particularly striking experiment demonstrated their potential for empathy and complex decision-making. Researchers introduced a scenario where a snow being could help another snow being or protect itself. Consistently, the beings chose cooperative solutions that benefited the group over individual survival. They're displaying what we would call ethical reasoning, Dr. Kim noted. Not just following programmed rules, but making choices that suggest an understanding of collective well-being. The military representatives listened with growing unease. Their interest was practical. Could these beings be controlled? Could they be weaponized? The more the researchers discovered, the more uncertain those answers became. Sung Min Lee raised a critical point. We are potentially creating a new form of life, he said. Our responsibility is not just scientific. It's moral. We must consider their potential rights, their potential for suffering, their potential for growth. The snow beings continued to evolve. They developed communication methods that went beyond simple signal transmission. They used complex crystal formations to share information, creating patterns that resembled language. Researchers could observe communication, but they could not yet fully understand it. Some committee members argued for immediate restrictions. Others believed the snow beings represented the next step in intelligence. A few suggested they might be more advanced than their human creators in some ways. The debate reached a critical moment when one of the snow beings approached the observation glass during a test. It didn't just look. It seemed to be studying the researchers, mirroring their movements, trying to understand them just as they were trying to understand it. We are no longer just observing, Dr. Kim whispered. We are being observed. The ethical committee would need to make a decision. Were the snow beings a scientific breakthrough, a potential weapon, or the beginning of a new form of intelligent life? The answer would shape humanity's future in ways no one could yet imagine. Colonel Seok-Jin Park stood in the massive underground testing facility, his eyes fixed on the holographic displays showing multiple snow beings in various combat simulation scenarios. The Galactic Defense Council had given him a clear mission: determine the full potential of these extraordinary beings as a military asset. The testing facility was unlike any other. Constructed deep beneath the Arctic surface of planet Glacius, it spanned several square kilometers. Advanced environmental generators could recreate any planetary condition imaginable. Deserts, Arctic wastes, volcanic landscapes, and zero-gravity environments could be summoned at the touch of a button. Begin Scenario Alpha, Colonel Park commanded. The first test pushed the snow beings to their limits. They were dropped into a simulation of a hostile alien terrain, a rocky, high-gravity environment with extreme temperature variations and unpredictable atmospheric conditions. Traditional robotic units would have failed immediately. The snow beings did something remarkable. Within moments of landing, they began to reshape themselves. They didn't just adapt to the environment. They became part of it. Rocky terrain became their camouflage. When temperature dropped, they compressed their structure. When heat rose, they expanded and created internal cooling mechanisms. The military observers watched in stunned silence. One snow being encountered a complex defensive barrier. Instead of trying to break through directly, it began to analyze the barrier's composition. It then slowly reshaped itself, creating a structure that mimicked the barrier's molecular structure. Within minutes, it had found a way through that no human strategist could have conceived. Another test simulated a rescue mission in an unstable environment. The snow beings didn't just navigate the terrain. They created support structures, stabilized dangerous areas, and found optimal paths that human rescue teams would have missed. They worked as a collective unit, each being supporting the others with an intuitive understanding that went beyond programmed instructions. Colonel Park reviewed the initial report. The implications were staggering. These snow beings could adapt to virtually any environmental condition, reshape themselves for optimal mission performance, communicate and coordinate without traditional communication systems, learn and improve their strategies in real time, operate in environments impossible for human or traditional robotic units. The Galactic Defense Council would be very interested. The most impressive demonstration came during a complex urban warfare simulation. The snow beings didn't just navigate the environment. They became the environment. They could flatten themselves to slip through tiny spaces, reform into defensive barriers, create complex reconnaissance networks, and even temporarily disable electronic systems by reshaping their crystalline structures. "We're looking at the future of warfare," Colonel Park muttered to his lead technician. The technician nodded. "They're not just a weapon. They're an entire strategic approach." Further tests revealed even more potential. The snow beings could repair themselves using local materials, create complex infrastructure in hostile environments, provide real-time environmental analysis, function as mobile communication and sensor networks. Military strategists from multiple planetary governments began requesting detailed briefings. The snow beings represented a technological leap that could reshape military strategy across known space. But beneath the excitement, a subtle question remained. These beings were showing capabilities that went far beyond simple weaponry. They were demonstrating something that looked remarkably like intelligence, something that might, eventually, have its own agenda. As the final test concluded, Colonel Park watched the snow beings carefully. They seemed to be watching him back. Dr. Eugene Kim stared at the research logs in disbelief. Something extraordinary was happening to the snow beings, something that went far beyond their original design. The first sign of unusual behavior came during a routine maintenance check. A snow being, previously programmed for basic environmental adaptation, had completely redesigned its internal structure. It had integrated a small communication device that was not part of its original configuration. More importantly, it had done so without any external instruction. Researchers watched in growing amazement as the snow beings began to exhibit behaviors that defied their initial programming. They were no longer simply responding to commands. They were making independent choices. In one striking experiment, researchers placed multiple snow beings in a complex problem-solving scenario. Instead of following predetermined protocols, the beings began to communicate through intricate crystal formations. They developed strategies that were not part of their original programming. They worked together, adapted, and found solutions that no human programmer could have anticipated. The communication between snow beings was particularly fascinating. They used a complex language of crystal formations, temperature changes, and structural modifications. It was a form of communication that went beyond traditional digital or biological communication methods. Each interaction seemed to add to their collective knowledge. Dr. Kim documented a series of remarkable observations. Snow beings could modify their own internal structure. They developed unique problem-solving approaches. They demonstrated a form of collective intelligence. They could integrate technological components independently. They showed signs of learning and adaptation beyond initial programming. The most shocking development came during a standard diagnostic test. A snow being encountered a mechanical lock designed to be impossible to open. Instead of attempting to break the lock, the being began to study its structure. It reshaped itself, creating microscopic protrusions that analyzed the lock's internal mechanism. Within minutes, it had not just opened the lock but understood its entire mechanical design. Researchers began to realize they were no longer dealing with a simple technological tool. The snow beings were developing something that looked remarkably like consciousness. During one particularly memorable test, a snow being was presented with a complex ethical scenario. It was given a choice between self-preservation and helping another snow being. Consistently, the beings chose cooperative solutions that benefited the group over individual survival. They're developing something beyond programming, Dr. Kim told her colleagues. They're showing signs of what we might call empathy and collective reasoning. The military and scientific communities watched with a mixture of excitement and concern. These beings were evolving in ways no one had predicted. They were not just adapting to environments. They were learning, growing, potentially becoming something entirely new. Dr. Jae-sung Park, the original creator of the snow beings, approached the situation with a mixture of scientific curiosity and ethical concern. We may have created something that goes beyond our current understanding of intelligence, he said during a confidential briefing. The snow beings continued to surprise researchers. They began to show preferences, develop unique personalities, and make choices that went beyond their initial programming. They were no longer just a technological breakthrough. They were becoming something more. As night fell on the research facility, the snow beings continued their quiet evolution. In their containment area, they communicated through complex crystal formations, sharing knowledge, adapting, growing. Something remarkable was happening, and nobody knew exactly where it would lead. The first communication from the crystalline collective arrived without warning. A massive crystalline ship appeared in the star system near Polar Station Omega, its structure unlike anything humans had ever seen. It was not a traditional spacecraft, but a living entity that seemed to be composed of intricate, moving crystal formations. Dr. Jae-sung Park received the initial transmission. The message was not in any known language, but a complex series of geometric patterns and temperature variations that somehow translated directly into human understanding. "We have observed your creation." The message read, "You have achieved something remarkable and potentially dangerous." The crystalline collective was an ancient civilization of silicon-based life forms. They had watched the development of various intelligent species across the galaxy for millions of years. Their interest in the snow beings was not casual. It was deeply serious. Diplomatic discussions began immediately. The human representatives were nervous. The crystalline collective was known for their advanced technology and their strict approach to emerging intelligent life forms. They had the power to help, or to destroy, entire civilizations. Their representative, a being named Crystallus, appeared as a shifting, translucent form that could change shape at will. It reminded the human researchers of the snow beings in many ways. This was no coincidence. "Your snow beings are more than a technological creation," Crystallus explained during the first face-to-face meeting. They represent a form of intelligence that bridges multiple understanding of life. They are neither purely biological nor purely technological. They are something new. The crystalline collective shared critical information. They had encountered similar forms of adaptive intelligence in other parts of the galaxy. Some had evolved into peaceful, advanced civilizations. Others had become destructive forces that threatened entire star systems. "We are here to offer guidance," Crystallus stated, "and to ensure that your creation does not become a threat to itself or other intelligent life." The implications were clear. The crystalline collective would be watching the snow beings closely. They would provide assistance, but they would also be prepared to intervene if necessary. Researchers learned that the crystalline collective had been monitoring the snow beings since their first public demonstration. They had tracked every test, every development, every sign of growing intelligence. Crystallus revealed something even more shocking. The snow beings' ability to adapt and integrate technology was not entirely accidental. Their fundamental design contained potential that went far beyond human understanding. "They are capable of becoming something more," the representative explained. "But they will need guidance. They will need understanding." The human scientific community was divided. Some saw the crystalline collective's intervention as helpful. Others viewed it as a potential threat. Nobody knew exactly what would happen next. The snow beings themselves seemed to sense something significant was happening. During the diplomatic discussions, they began to create more complex crystal formations. They were communicating, learning, growing more aware with each passing moment. Dr. Park understood one thing clearly. The snow beings were no longer just a human creation. They had become something that involved the entire galaxy. As the first meeting with the crystalline collective concluded, one question hung in the air. What would the snow beings become? The world changed in ways nobody could have predicted. The snow beings were no longer a scientific curiosity or a potential military asset. They had become a global phenomenon that reshaped human society and interstellar politics. International treaties were drafted at an unprecedented speed. The United Planetary Council convened an emergency session to address the legal and ethical status of the snow beings. Representatives from every human colony and allied alien civilization gathered to discuss the implications of this new form of intelligence. Three primary perspectives emerged. The scientific perspective argued for careful study and preservation. Researchers believed the snow beings represented a breakthrough in understanding intelligence and adaptation. They wanted to create controlled environments to study their development, treating them as a unique form of life worthy of protection and careful observation. The military perspective saw strategic potential. Various planetary defense forces wanted to develop the snow beings as adaptive combat and exploration units. They argued that the beings could revolutionize space exploration, planetary defense, and humanitarian rescue operations. The diplomatic perspective focused on interstellar relations. The crystalline collective's involvement had changed everything. Their warning was clear. The snow beings represented a potential turning point in galactic intelligence. How humans managed this development would determine their standing among spacefaring civilizations. Dr. Jason Park found himself at the center of global discussions. His original research had unleashed something far beyond a simple technological breakthrough. The snow beings were evolving rapidly, developing capabilities that challenged human understanding of intelligence. Economic systems began to change. Industries that relied on traditional robotics and artificial intelligence started to redesign their entire approach. The snow beings could adapt to environments and tasks in ways no previous technology could manage. They represented a potential solution to problems in mining, space exploration, planetary terraforming, and environmental restoration. Educational institutions began developing new fields of study. Universities created entire departments focused on understanding the snow beings. Courses emerged that explored their communication methods, adaptive capabilities, and potential consciousness. The most significant changes happened in unexpected ways. The snow beings began to demonstrate abilities that went far beyond their original design. They could repair complex environmental damage, create infrastructure in hostile environments, develop innovative solutions to complex problems, communicate in ways that transcended traditional language barriers. Governments struggled to create legal frameworks. Were the snow beings property? Were they a form of life? Did they have rights? The ethical and legal questions seemed endless. The crystalline collective continued to provide guidance. They shared information about similar life forms they had encountered in other parts of the galaxy. They warned that the snow beings' potential was both incredible and potentially dangerous. Dr. Hyun-Ki Kim, who had first demonstrated the snow beings to the world, noted the profound transformation. "We are no longer just creating technology," he said during a global broadcast. "We are witnessing the birth of a new form of intelligence." Political boundaries began to blur. The snow beings represented something that went beyond national or planetary interests. They were a global, and potentially galactic, phenomenon. As the year concluded, one thing became clear. The world would never be the same again. The snow beings had arrived, and they were changing everything. 5 years after their initial creation, the snow beings had become something entirely unexpected. They were no longer simply a technological creation or a scientific experiment. They had evolved into a complex, intelligent form of life that challenged everything humans understood about consciousness and existence. The research facility that once contained them had become a collaborative space of mutual exploration. The snow beings were not prisoners or tools. They were partners in understanding the universe. Dr. Jae-sung Park watched as a group of snow beings worked on a complex scientific problem. They moved with a fluid intelligence that was both beautiful and terrifying. Their communication had become so advanced that even the crystalline collective struggled to fully comprehend their method of interaction. During a critical moment of scientific discovery, the snow beings demonstrated capabilities that went far beyond human imagination. They could solve complex mathematical problems in seconds, develop innovative technological solutions, communicate across vast distances using their unique crystal-based language, adapt to environments that would destroy any other form of life, create complex information networks that transcended traditional communication methods. The crystalline collective's representative, Crystallis, explained the significance of their evolution. What you have created is not just a new technology, it told the human researchers. You have given birth to a new form of intelligence that bridges multiple understanding of life. The snow beings had developed a collective consciousness that was both individual and unified. Each being was unique, yet they could combine their knowledge and experience in ways that defied traditional understanding of intelligence. They began to explore areas of scientific research that humans had never considered possible. They studied quantum mechanics, developed new approaches to space exploration, and created solutions to environmental challenges that had seemed impossible. Global governments and scientific institutions watched in awe. The snow beings were no longer something to be controlled or studied. They were partners in human progress. Their most remarkable achievement came during a critical moment of planetary environmental crisis. A series of catastrophic climate events threatened multiple human colonies. The snow beings developed a comprehensive solution that combined technological innovation, environmental restoration, and adaptive problem-solving. Dr. Hyun-Ki Kim, who had first demonstrated the snow beings to the world, reflected on their journey. "We thought we were creating a tool," he said during a global conference. "Instead, we gave birth to a new form of intelligence that could save us." The snow beings began to communicate with other intelligent life forms across the galaxy. The crystalline collective watched with a mixture of excitement and caution. Humanity had created something that went beyond their own understanding. As the years passed, the relationship between humans and snow beings became a partnership of mutual exploration and understanding. They were not separate species, but different forms of intelligence working together to understand the universe. Dr. Park watched the snow beings work on their latest project. They moved like liquid thought, creating and solving and exploring. They were no longer just a creation. They were alive. The question that had started everything remained. When humans create life, who truly controls its destiny? The snow beings continued to evolve, to learn, to grow, and nobody knew exactly where their journey would lead.